Duke, you suck.
You shut your mouth!
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. I'm here with my longtime and good friend, Jamie Henwood, a.k.a. Stampede Wrestling alumni, Dungeon alumni, multiple matches in Stampede Wrestling, a very long and tenuous run. Jamie Henwood, welcome to the show. Belle Lovitz, God bless you. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you for having me. I am pumped. I've been waiting in line patiently to be your next guest, so I'm so happy to be here.
Well, and like we were saying before I started recording here, that I do apologize for taking so long to get you on here, because I just, people may not realize that I've just been flying by the seat of my pants all summer long since I started, since my work kicked up, and I'm getting real busy. So,
well, you'd never guess it. You're killing this.
Oh, well, thank you. You're just being polite because you know me.
Interviewer extraordinaire right here. I'm so
get out of here.
Let's do this.
Get out of here. So first of all, I actually, you mentioned it before we came on, and now I'm enamored and probably won't be able to think about anybody else till we talk about it. So we're going to come back to the wrestling and everything else you got going on. Let's talk about the arcade I see in your background. Like, Jamie told me before we came on, she built an arcade, and I instantly recognized a Pac-Man game over her shoulder there.
Yes.
So what do you have going on down there?
Well, once I, became a real adult and, bought a house and did all that kind of stuff, I realized that I don't have any kids, so I don't need to waste money on like school supplies and all that kind of shit. I'm just going to buy toys for me. So I built an arcade in my house. I got skee ball, I got basketball, I got arcade Pac-Man. This is my dream room right here. And this was well worth the price.
That, you know what, man, I love that, because I so often talk to people about the definition of success. You know what I mean? And people want certain levels of success or certain things to define them. And I say, like, if you say you have your dream room behind you right there, success.
Right? I know. That's how I feel every day. I walk down here and I'm like, I have a freaking arcade. Yeah, killing it.
Yeah, you have that kind of like, holy shit, I can't believe this is mine.
This is mine. Yeah, I did this.
Yeah, and that's, and you know what, that's through nothing but hard work. And that's one thing I can say, since I seen you, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to know how you ended up at the dungeon. But I think, were you at the dungeon when I came back? I'd been gone for a while and come back, and you were there. Okay.
Yes, I came back, or I started with this really weird time where nobody was around. I got brought in by a guy named Kenny Johnson, primetime Kenny Johnson himself.
Yeah, Kenny J. I love that guy.
Yes, he actually was good friends with this guy named Phil, who was on my brother's flag football team. And my brother's name is Bobby. And one day after practice, he throws on a Stampede Wrestling Kicks Ass shirt because he had just like watched a show recently. And this guy, Phil, is like, hey, you like wrestling? And my brother, being this like encyclopedia wrestling nerd, was like, well, let me tell you about wrestling. And so he gets into it. And then this guy, Phil, is like, well, you wouldn't believe it, but I have this friend, Kenny, and he wrestles for Stampede Wrestling. You want an introduction? And then from there, we went and we met Kenny Johnson, and he brought us to the Heart House for the first time. And it was awesome because the ring was set up outside and just me and my brother and Kenny. And then TJ actually came out. It's a long story. I'll tell you this later, but TJ and I actually went to junior high together. So that's a side note, but we can come back to that. But anyways, yeah, so we started just doing like light training with this guy, Kenny Johnson, at BJ's. But that summer, nobody was at Stampede Wrestling. So that's probably why they were willing to like use and book us rookies that didn't know what we were doing. Cause like you weren't there, Divine wasn't there, like none of the main names were there at the time.
Took a little hiatus.
Right. Other than Tiger was there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that was, my first summer. But then all of a sudden, like the fall hit and all you guys came back and I'm there. I'm like, oh, hi, I'm new.
I'm new. Yeah, but it was about time, because we didn't have, that was one thing that was grossly missing off our rosters. And I mean, to some degree still is, because at best we get, maybe 4 ladies on a card at, on a good night. So it was something like, holy shit, we have ladies now.
Yeah.
Or at least, so, and I mean, you a lot of people don't realize this, but you were to Natty what I was to Pistol Pollock. Do you know what I mean? Like you traveled up and down a lot of highways putting Natty over. And, and I actually, I reached out to her today before we did this and just asked if she had anything she wanted me to say or pass along. And and she wanted me to say hello, first of all, and thank you for everything you did in helping her come along and get along in this business and kind of come up and learn everything the way she did, because without you, she didn't have anybody else to work with, and she definitely recognized that. And so she just wanted me to let you know.
Well, that's so sweet. Natty and I, like, and she was the same for me, like back to your what was your gauge of success? Like, you're right, I didn't make it to the WWE, but what I was doing and where I was going at the time, if I didn't have Natty to train and like be my legit best friend in wrestling, I wouldn't have been able to do anything either. Like we were really lucky to find each other when we did. And it was kind of interesting. Like when I first started, like I made my debut at the Rockyford Rodeo. Do you remember?
We all did. We honestly, I don't.
That was like the time to debut. So
heck yeah.
Between then and December, Natty wasn't working the shows. She was doing some other stuff with like Matt. That was when like Matt Ratz was kind of doing some stuff. And I know she was like doing some loose training with TJ, but nothing really official. So I started going to these shows and I would always see her there, but she was never, you know what I mean? Like in the show, like I wasn't wrestling. I was just that big mouth valet that was like coming out with the heels, and that was fine for that, you know, for that moment in time. And then when Bruce was like, hey, like, you want to learn to wrestle? And I was like, yes, I do. And he's like, all right, come to the house. And I was like, I think I just got invited to the dungeon. Like
that is come to the house. Hey, that's dynamite.
Yes. So I started showing up to the house Wednesday night practice, and Natty was never actually in the practice. She was always there because she lived, you know, in the back house. Yeah. But she was always just kind of hanging around. And finally I was like, Natty, do you want to wrestle? Like, I need someone, you want to wrestle with me? And then we just kind of like, finally I grabbed her and I was just like, you got to come here and train.
Dragged her into it.
Yeah, like I can only slap Randy Myers across the face so long in dungeon practice before I need to like learn real shit. So
I remember coming back to those scenarios where there was a lot of guys getting slapped in the face by you and Natty.
Right. And we laughed about that forever. And I know that this is a very horrifying term to use, and we used it so loosely, but we would always laugh about the rape scenes in the dungeon. And they would always start off with like one of us, like we were doing this little skit and us lonely girl walking down the dungeon mat. And then all of a sudden Big Red comes out of nowhere and is like, hey bitch, give me all your money. And then Bruce would have to turn around and kick him in the dick. And it was like, okay. And then time on the mat, and it's just like, rape scene down.
How many times, and I mean, God bless Big Red, because how many slaps across the face do you think that guy took?
Hundreds and hundreds. Yeah. And I'll tell you that my saddest person is like Theo and I went through it together. Randy Myers and I started at the exact same time. He was easily at that time like my best bro in wrestling. We understood each other. We were starting out as kind of rookie losers. Nobody gave a shit about us. And we were always the ones that Bruce would like throw up to do stuff together. And I think it was more of like, to kind of like, I get now that I got ribbed a lot and didn't realize I was getting ribbed, but
don't think for a second it didn't happen to all of us.
And that's the thing. And I know it. And it's funny that I actually got used to rib a lot of people, because Bruce would use me to rib Theo and be like, how many slaps can Theo take in the face today or whatever? So anyways, the slap story I want to tell you is it was Dandy Myers, and that sweet dandy. He would stand on that dungeon mat and I'd haul off and slap him. And then Bruce, he'd be like, another one. Yeah. And then you hit him with another one.
And lay it in.
And this time lay it in. Exactly. And then I would do like 4 or 5. And then Bruce would walk up and he'd be like, you know, it's more like this. Bam, bam, bam. And he'd just start laying it to Dan. And finally, by like the 40th slap, you can see Dan's like face is shaking. Like he's like,
was he any more than 14 when he came?
No, he was like, I think he might have been a little older. Like he wasn't, because remember when the kids came in, like Chucky and Brandon, and they were legit 14, 15.
Yeah, they were just these rosy faced little kids.
Yes. Yeah. It was crazy. Anyways, I have this like visual still to this day of Dandy Myers in my head, and his little shaking chin and me just looking at him being like, sorry, bro, but if I don't hit you as hard as I can, this will never end.
Right.
Damn.
Yeah. And I can remember, tell me you didn't, when Natty first broke into the WWE and she'd be working with those, you know, and no disrespect to any of the ladies that were there, but a lot of them weren't trained the way we were trained. Oh. And you'd see Natty slap those girls and holy shit.
You would feel it. Yeah. Cause there was no selling necessary when it came to Natty and I, because we had this really, like, we were very respectful of each other and each other's bodies, and we weren't about to hurt each other. But if you weren't going to lay that in as hard as you could, I'm not selling your shit. And
No.
I would do it back to her, even though she was the badass tough girl. I'd be like, lay it in, Natty, I could take it. And then she'd clobber me. I'd be like, oh, I can't breathe.
Well, and outside I would say, like, you two work stronger style than any of us. Like,
She was, we just, and that was the thing. Like, that's all I cared about when I first started wrestling. Like, all I wanted to do was wrestle and learn everything I possibly could. I didn't care about the tits. I didn't care about the fake eyelashes. I didn't want the liposuction and like to wear my bikini in the ring. I really truly believed that if I became a badass wrestler, nobody would care if I wasn't the pretty girl or the big titted girl in her bikini. I really thought my work would speak louder than anything else. Lesson learned, but oh well.
Well, and for all of us, right? Yeah. For all of us. I mean, you know, there were some of us that didn't do our work in the gym because we were wrestlers, not bodybuilders, right? Right. You know, I remember Mike McFly. I don't know if you remember him.
I do.
But I remember being in the gym and talking to like James Trimble, who's a hell of a guy, but was relatively what I'll call rigid to work with, you know? And so I'd see him in the gym working out. I'd be like, dude, like, you need to learn how to wrestle. You're, you know, and I could, you know, you're not a bodybuilder or a wrestler. And Mike McFly, like, actually, we're fucking both now. I was like, that son of a bitch is right.
Oh, you know? That's so funny.
Yeah. So now fast forward, you paid your dues at Stampede through, you know, like you say, all the dungeon slaps in the face and weird scenario scenes. Then you end up in OVW.
I did. It came to a point where it was like, this can't be it. Like, I have to either like suck it up and make a big move, or nothing's going to happen for me, because unfortunately, being in Calgary, even though you have that wonderful culture of the dungeon coming behind you, nobody gives a shit to the extent that they're not going to buy a plane ticket for you to the East Coast. Great. You came from the dungeon, but if you can't get here and wrestle, we're not booking you. So it was like, 100%. Nothing's really happening where we were. And so it was like, well, why would I go? Like, I could have gone, like, I had some opportunities to do stuff with Shimmer or maybe even Ring of Honor. But then it was like, well, at this point, WWE still has their contract people in OVW. Why don't I, like, why would I try for anything else? And I know that at that time was kind of when like all us boys in the dungeon were like, F the WWE, we don't care. We're not going to go there. We're going to go to Japan and we're going to beat the shit out of people. We don't need corporations and whatever. So anyways, I was the first one that was kind of like, actually, I think I need to do something. So I went to a tryout in OVW, and I got asked to come back and join Rip Rogers' intermediate class. So OVW, there was the top guys, and they were all under contract with WWE. And then there was Rip's class, and then there was the beginners class. So you're kind of like that next step to get up. If so
you're going in there in a good spot.
Exactly. So I think keep in mind too, like, being a Canadian, that was the hardest thing about my wrestling career, is that if there was no action in Canada, anytime I went to the States, it was a there and back, because I couldn't stay there and work. Like, I was working in restaurants and bars all the time here, working like a maniac to save money so I could like compile like 10 grand to go down and wrestle for like 4 months or something like that.
Right.
So eventually that's what I did. I saved up a bunch of money. I went down, I joined Rip Rogers' class. It was very different. Like, I love that we came from the Hearts, because Bruce had a really unique training style, and so did Ross. Like, that's another thing we should talk about. Ross Hart was the best to me. There was nobody who treated me better than Ross Hart. That guy did so much for me. Like, he bought me gear when I couldn't afford it. He bought me boots when I couldn't afford it. He met me at the gym twice a week to help me build muscle because I was skinny. Like, Ross did a lot of stuff for me. So anyways,
Ross Hart is a good man.
Isn't he a gem? Like,
he's literally one of the, like, I didn't always have the best business relationship with the Hart family, like, you know, with Bruce and Ross in particular. Sometimes we'd butt heads, but I will never question Ross's motives and what he taught me about wrestling and what kind of human being he is. Yeah. Right. Like, this is a story that'll tell you who Ross Hart is. One night we're walking in we're going to a Metallica concert. And there's like myself, Pistol Pollock, Crazy Dean, couple knucklehead buddies we know.
I love that crew. That crew is awesome.
And Ross Hart's with us, right? Yes. And there's garbage on a bench outside the Saddle Dome, just on one of those bus benches, you know?
Right.
Ross stops, picks up the garbage, cleans it up, takes it to the nearest trash receptacle, deposits it, and continues on with his day. That's the kind of human being Ross Hart is.
That's our Ross Hart.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, I think I'm a good guy. I've never picked up garbage.
I know, right?
Like,
without being forced to.
Yeah. And I don't mean to get derailed, because sometimes, like, Ross is one of those guys, man. He just, every time I see Ross, he asks how I'm doing. He asks how my wife's doing. He legit is asking how you're doing. Right. Like, Ross is a good guy. I love Ross. He's
not just going through the emotions. He legit wants to know, like, he would go out for lunch with my dad. Right. He just wanted to make sure that my whole life was doing well, and that I was like becoming a well-rounded human as I was becoming a wrestler. Like, he was so damn good to me, and I will never forget him. So when I went to OVW and meeting someone like Rip Rogers, that guy's wild. Like, Rip Rogers he's so freaking cool, and he knows so much shit. And just like listening to like 2 conversations of his about wrestling, you feel so much smarter about the business, but he has a very hard edge. Yeah. And sometimes when you feel really shitty about yourself all the time, you need a little bit of softness, and he just didn't have that softness.
He's not giving you that, eh?
No. And he would refer to the girls as C words. I'd be like, yeah, get in the ring. And I would just sit there. And then I remember my friend Ollie tapping me on the shoulder, and he's like, I'm really sorry to tell you that, but when he says that, he means you guys, like, girls, get in the ring. And I was like, oh, this is new. Okay. And then
can we please just go back to the rape scenes?
Right? Like, what's happening? But then you learn it, and you realize that he has no ill intentions. He's just an old school guy, and that's what he calls us. And just listen up and do your shit and get your
good,
spot.
Bad, or indifferent. That's just what he's saying. And he doesn't mean you're a bad person because of it. It's just the word he uses.
It's just the word, right? Yeah. So adapting to Rip was definitely something unique, but man, that was a really cool time, because I was just being somewhere to live, to wrestle. That was the first time I ever actually got to do that, where it was like, I don't work a real job right now. All I do is wrestle. All I do is train. All I do is try to go on shows, stuff like that. So yeah, OVW was wicked cool. But of course, I got hurt. Yeah. And this is the stupidest thing ever. I blew my neck and my rotator cuff on a botched O'Connor roll. Really? You heard me. Yes. So I was getting rolled up by the dude, and the dude was just this huge because we would just like do drills, and you would grab whoever was closest to you in the arena. You would just chain wrestle, and then Rip would yell switch, and then you'd grab whoever next was you and you chain wrestle. Okay. So I ended up being with like the beefcake of the class. Like, I'm the smallest, he's the biggest, he's like all stiff and whatever. So he goes to roll me up for the O'Connor. I roll back, he goes to sit on me, loses his balance, and like completely sat down, and like this part separated from that part. So yeah. And then after that happens, you're in the United States alone. I have no job. I have no health care. I'm like, well, what now?
Looks like I'm going home.
Yeah. So I go home, but that was the thing, is that started this wild cycle of me of going home, rehab, working, money, back to OVW. Yeah. And that was the really cool thing about Rip, is that he would always let me leave and come back. You always have a home here, so go make your money, come back when you can. Like,
that's good. That's a good guy.
Yeah, he was pretty good to me too. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to OVW.
Okay. Now I'm going to even fast forward a little faster, because there's something, people consistently ask me, and you may not realize this. There's a lot of people like yourself that I've met in the business that are extremely humble about their place in the business. And you're somebody that no matter kind of who I'm talking to, if I talk to anybody about kind of that early to mid 2000s, 2007 range of Stampede Wrestling, every single person without fail asks, what's Belle Lovitz up to? Literally everybody asks.
That makes me so happy.
Well, and the truth is, I get asked so much, and I was trying to find it on my Facebook page before we started this, but I'm a loser. What I get asked so much about you that I actually went on my Facebook page and kind of put up a Q&A to see if there was questions that people wanted to ask about you. And to tell you the truth, most of them were, there's about 10 or 12 people there, and most of them were just saying, please tell Belle, I think she's awesome. I miss her. She was amazing in Stampede Wrestling. And most of them just hope you're doing really well.
That's so damn nice to hear, because that's something else, like, not to be like a cheesy cliche, but like those years in Stampede, those solid like 3 or 4 years, like you're saying, like 2001 to like 2006, 7, that was just such a solid time at Stampede Wrestling, where we had a wicked following of fans. Like, do you remember like the hooligans and the masked men and these committed people that would come every week, and then they would like sit and talk with you after? Like, our fans were great, and I'm happy that some of them remember me.
Well, actually, Alex from the Hooligans is one of the guys that that commented, and he just kind of said, like, there is a name that I haven't heard in a long time, and he just specifically said he hopes you're doing well.
Well, that is sure sweet, because I'm not sure if it was him, but one of the Hooligans' daughters was one of my biggest fans, and she would make me things, and she made me a Belle Lovitz necklace that I still to this day own.
That's
this girl's
adorable.
Probably like 25 years old right now, but I remember this sweet little kid, and they made an effort to let you know that they valued you and your performance, and I loved it.
Well, and that's what, people don't understand is kind of the relationships that we do have with the fans at these shows, because I mean, we see them so often. Yeah. Right. Like every 2 weeks. I mean, there might be a rotation of certain fans, but there's a core of about 25 to 50 fans that would be at pretty much every single show. And it just always blew me away that they were willing to come out like every second Friday night and watch our stuff.
Yeah, like there was days that I was like, man, it's snowing, I don't want to go. And then you go and there's still 50 people there, and you're like, you guys are badass. I didn't even want to come.
Yeah, and a lot of them were taking the bus. You know what I mean?
The Ogden Legion.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. Yeah, to a neighborhood you wouldn't necessarily want to go to, anyways. Actually, and on this thread, there's a picture of Takeshi. Yeah, and he's wearing his Belle Lovitz t-shirt, and it says, "Please let her know that I am carrying her legacy."
Oh, Dr. Kyoto, you warm my heart, because for those of you who remember, me and the doctor were the heel managers for pretty much the entire card, because Bruce liked to really get his money worth out of us. And we went out for legit every match and managed the heels. And I probably did more spots with Takeshi than I did with anybody else. He's over there distracting the ref and I'm hitting the low blow, or he's fanning the guy and I'm distracting the ref, whatever. He was amazing. Yeah. Takeshi, I miss you.
What's funny is, for a guy too that, I mean, in my mind's eye, I didn't see him train, so I didn't realize he spent a lot of time. So to me, his timing was always incredible for a guy that I didn't, that I didn't think trained. Like he never seemed to miss a spot.
He's so good.
So hey, referee, do you remember the Belgian ref, Renee Richards?
I love Renee Richards.
He wants to know. He says, "What was your final tally in your best of 273 series against Natty?"
Yeah, I wish I knew the exact number of matches we had, but let's be honest here. Win-loss column, it was maybe a 1 win and 272 losses, because let's be very honest, I never beat Natty.
No, and if it makes you feel any better, I think I main evented with Pistol Pollock every town for about 2 years, and I think I beat him by DQ once and count out once.
Well, the best thing about it was that I would always come to the ring with my crew, right? So Takeshi would be with me. Randy Myers was always with me, because we were this little crew.
Yeah, Mama Myers sometimes.
Right? And then Natty would be the hero, and she'd fire up and she'd hit me with, the sharpshooter or something big, and she'd clean pin me, and that was awesome. And then next week, Randy and Mama Myers and Dan and all the people are getting involved, and you're like, finally, Belle's gonna do it. But no, hell no, not Natty. She's low blowing people. She's power bombing the ref. She's doing all this, and then she still clean pins me. So
yeah, I know you think you're gonna win this week, but you're crazy.
That's what you think.
yeah, no, and I totally, man. I was literally like, it didn't matter what. I would never get a match over on Pistol Pollock, no matter what I did.
No, it's okay to be a jobber. I think jobber was my middle name.
Yeah, that's what I used to call myself, Pistol Pollock's personal canvas back.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, Johnny Devine wants to know, who is your favorite wrestler and why is Johnny Devine him?
Okay, let's do this. Are we ready for the Johnny Devine part of my story?
Yeah, let's hear the Johnny Devine.
I love him. I love him so much. I'm going to start off I'm going to tell you quick little 2 things. When I first started, like I said, I came in with my brother and Kenny Johnson. Right. Within the first 2 months of me being there, my brother got hurt. Some weird shit happened. He wasn't vibing anymore. He quits. Kenny Johnson has some other personal stuff. He's out. And all of a sudden, I'm standing here, a 2-month rookie at Stampede Wrestling, all by myself.
Right.
And I was freaking terrified. And the first person who made an effort to like talk to me and welcome me and not make me feel like he was hitting on me was actually Hotshot. And there was this really crazy night where, you know, like when Ted starts getting crazy at a show and starts, you know, and starts doing run-ins that maybe
high spots start running amok.
Yeah, and you're like, what's going on? I don't know if this is real. I don't remember anyone talking about what's going on. And he did some really crazy shit that really scared me one night. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. And nobody was talking to me because I didn't know anybody. And who comes up to me but good old Hotshot? And he's like, so
we're all just used to it.
Right? He's like, so that was your first impromptu run-in, wasn't it? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, were you scared? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, you did a good job. Okay, thank you, because I don't know what the F is going on right now, and I'm so overwhelmed. He's like, nope, you did exactly what you should have done. Good job, hon.
Just stay out of the way.
Like, okay, that's great. And then also there was this one time where we were doing face stomps in the dungeon, because in the dungeon, if you remember, we used to all stand in a circle.
Yep.
And then one person, so this Juggernaut would give head stomps, Jordy would give lifters, JP would give chops, and you would go and you would take your beats through the whole circle. Right. So I go through the circle, get shit kicked, and the last person in the line is Juggernaut. And it's like, and I'm like, what move are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm doing head stomps. And he kind of gets this little like smile on his face. And I'm just like, oh shit, I think I'm gonna die. Yeah. So he you know, snapmares me down on the mat, and he starts to go it. And sure enough, as he starts picking up that leg, he loses his balance, full heel into my forehead, and he starts laughing. And then who comes over and picks me up but Johnny Divine. And he's like, hey kid, you got a shoe print on your forehead, but it doesn't matter. You look great. Just tell everybody you come from the dungeon. Okay.
Hey, always a positive note.
Like, yeah, like he was just that guy that always looked out for me, always like made sure that I was okay and safe. Like, it's not, I never felt, that was the beauty. Like, I know lots of girls and women in wrestling don't always get treated so well. And I know there's lots of weird, you know, sexual innuendos and gross things that go on, but I can 100% say that when I was in Stampede Wrestling, I never experienced it once. And I never felt unsafe or threatened by any of the boys on my card. And it was because you all looked out for me. You know what I mean? I think being like the lonely girl that wasn't a heart, didn't have any association with everybody. I feel like everybody took a little like ownership of like protecting me and making sure that I was okay at shows, or you know what I mean? And
well, we were really pretty close knit. I mean, you could even use the word clique, I think, about the group of us that did come out of the dungeon in around that time. Like, you know, there's a lot of shows on where, you know, if there's 15 people on the roster, 10 of us would be from the dungeon.
Exactly.
And, you know, it was kind of unfortunate because it wasn't that we were rude to the people that weren't from the dungeon. I don't think we were ever like that, but I think there was definitely like, we're from the dungeon and you're not. Like, you know, and it you know, looking back, I don't right or wrong, it was just kind of unfortunately the way we were, but it was also why we looked out for the Belle Lovitzes and the Jamies and the, you know, nobody fucked with anybody from the dungeon. That's for sure. Like,
it was always really good. And you, Jordy, I have to tell you that you were the first person to like believe in me and take me on a show that wasn't Stampede. And I don't know if you remember it, but you took me somewhere and I wrestled a girl named Rave in a building that had a blue floor. I don't know if you remember that, but it was somewhere in Edmonton. And I think
that was the roller hockey rink at PWA.
Yes,
I do. Okay. I think I remember the venue. I don't remember the show, but I remember the venue.
But that's what I mean. Like people like you that like guys that legit looked out for me and helped me get booked places and would come to their shows early and help me train and help me like just do stuff, that I was really fortunate to be where I was when I was, but with the guys that I was with.
Right. Well, the thing is, when somebody was as hungry as you know what I mean? Like you say, you were at the show early, setting up the ring and willing to train early and get in there. And I mean, you and Natty like kicked the shit out of each other, and you guys never missed a show. Do you know what I mean? Like it always impressed me, and something that, you know, somebody that I started coaching women's wrestling, like amateur wrestling, probably 1991 at the latest. And one thing I always noticed, and people can at me if they want, they can eat a plate of dicks because I'll stand by what I'm about to say. But I found, especially in wrestling, when ladies are in a position that they traditionally wouldn't be in, because I'll never use the phrase, or sometimes maybe even feel they don't belong.
Yeah.
They work harder at it than the guys do. And men don't realize, like, I don't know how much you watch Raw, but there was a long time on Raw when people were saying that, oh, they're just booking the women better on Monday Night Raw. That's why the women are having better matches. That's why the women are doing this. Like, no, it's because they're fucking working harder.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Right. Like we would have, 6-10 matches on a card, and you and Natty would stand out every time on that card because you outworked half of the guys on the card.
Yeah, I feel like that was something that was always important to us, is that we don't want to just be like the novelty girls match where it's like, oh, everybody get ready for the girls match. We're going to all watch it and laugh at it anyways, because it's something different. People were like, oh shit, yeah, it's the girls matches. These girls are going to kick the shit out of each other tonight and we're going to love it. And that was our goal. And
I think one of the important things is you guys were young enough and modest enough that you dressed. And I know people, you can at me about this if you want, but you guys dressed conservatively.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? It was not like you guys were there to wrestle. This was not a TNA show. It's no secret. I mean, looking at you now, you and Natty are both beautiful girls, but at no point you guys were selling the wrestling through and through.
Yep. That was never our goal. Like when we first got our first gear, and I remember wanting tights, and Ross was like, no, I think we should do shorts. And I was like, but I don't want people to see my legs. That's not necessary. And, Natty's wearing her full on blurred tracksuit, and she's like, forget that. Let's just wrestle. I don't care what we're wearing, but
But
matter.
I mean, I think that's important to make sure you're comfortable with your wrestling before you start worrying about all the other shit.
Yes. Right? Yes. And seeing that's something that is so backwards with the WWE. I'll just tell you what my experience was, is that I was kind of told that if I ever wanted to legit be considered for making it, I needed to get the lady trifecta of the nose job, the boob job, and the liposuction. Right. I was probably okay and didn't need the liposuction because I was skinny. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, I get it. I have a big nose. It's been cracked like 5 times. Natty Neidhart forearm me in the nose. Yeah, there's a reason it looks like this.
Have you seen the forearms on Natty? She'd break your nose too.
Yeah, and then I thought really long and hard about the whole boobs thing, because that, as stupid as it sounds, that is a huge thing for women in this business. Yeah. Like if you don't got big tits, I don't know.
Especially when we were coming up, Jamie, it was a given. It was a given.
Totally. And so I really thought about like, okay, so Jamie now might like the tits because she feels more comfortable in wearing a skimpy thing for wrestling. But is Jamie at age 40 going to want those tits? And I can definitely tell you that Jamie at age 40 is glad she didn't get the tits, because I don't think I'd be comfortable in my own body. And
Jamie
also,
at age 40 is happy with Jamie at age 40.
Right? Yeah. And there was a couple of girls that I know that actually did the surgeries in hopes of getting, recognized or seen. And they almost had to relearn how to wrestle with the boobs, because their body is a completely different body now. And
especially some of them go crazy.
Right.
Yes. Right. Yes. Like, I don't want to, and again, I guess all men are different, but a woman that weighs 90 pounds with double D cans, to me, it always just looks weird. Like it just looks weird, and I always think, geez, how do you work around those? Yeah.
And that's the thing. You essentially are like a day one rookie. How do I wrestle in this body? Because nothing works how it used to work.
Yeah. Well, now at this stage of my life, I'm like, well, how do you swing a golf club around those? Like that's that's a whole different conversation.
Oh, that's so awesome.
No, but I mean, the thing is, I think the expectation at that time, that women would get boob jobs and every guy would be a chemistry experiment.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And we came from a roster of people that we had some really good workers, but none of us were really chemistry experiments. You know what I mean?
But that was the thing. If the wrestling actually mattered, who cares how you guys look? Because watching matches with some of the guys that we got to watch, they were like textbook shit. But you don't have big arms and blow your triceps when you're jogging with your wife. I don't know.
Well, and that's what people would say, like, why didn't you travel much? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you make it here? Why didn't you make it there? And I'd say, why would I travel to go work? And no disrespect to anybody else, but at that time, I look at the roster we had with the Dave Swifts and the Harry TJs, Eric's, totally. And then even our mid card guys, the Jason Bookers. We had really good people to work with. So it's like, why am I going to go somewhere else for $50 a night, work with some person I may or may not know, some guy or gal I may or may not trust, so I can get injured and miss work next week when I can just go work with fucking TJ and Harry on Friday night? Like, are you crazy?
And that's the thing. We had such a stacked roster for a while there. It didn't matter when you got booked. You could be in the opening match with Randy. You could be in the mid-card match with, Divine. You could be in the main event with Harry. It didn't matter because you were going to have a good match.
Yeah. Like, and that, I don't care what anyone says. When I look at our rosters at those times through, the late 90s, very late 90s through 2005, 2006, there weren't better independent rosters anywhere. And I mean, I guess to say like, there were rosters with more exposure,
Sure.
but match in, match out, I just don't see it. Like I used to watch a lot of wrestling back then, and you'd watch 5 dog shit matches in the main event to be all right,
Yeah.
Or, maybe I'm biased, but that's how I felt.
And that's how I felt too. It's like, I'm seeing what else is out there. I can do better than that. I just can't get there.
Well, and for myself, I know definitely the foolish thing I did, and people may or may not believe this, but when an opportunity knocked a couple times, I didn't open the door. Right. One time was I didn't, I listened to not some bullshit, but I just listened to somebody else. The other 2 times they just fired 150 guys. They weren't looking for me. You know what I mean? So it was kind of, the timing was definitely like, it would have been a decent payday and I would have got to wrestle for the WWE in front of my hometown. But I never broke into pro wrestling thinking I can't wait to wrestle for the WWE in my hometown. My whole thing was I wanted to make a living wrestling, period.
Yes.
Totally. So, and it was, I remember one time Tiger Khan actually phoned me from New York and he's like, man, they're waiting for your call. Like, I'm going to give you this guy's phone number. You call them and they're going to put you on the show. And I'm like, yeah, they're not looking for me, man. He was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because everybody was, that was the show. Like Bill Yates was on, the Highlander was on, Pollock was on, like everybody was on that show. And they just bought WCW.
Yes.
Right. Like they're not looking for me, man. Like, they just released Juventud Guerrero. They're not fucking signing me.
Me.
Yeah. Like, I was fairly realistic about what was going on at that time. And I feel a lot of us, and I would put you in this group, if we would have got in 5 years sooner or 5 years later, we probably would have been just fine.
I think that there would have been differences for sure. I think about stuff like that too.
Yeah. Like the timing was it was a tough time because business was definitely going through an upcycle. And there was a time when I was first breaking in when WCW and WWE were literally signing people just so the other guy couldn't. Like once developmentals became a thing. You know what I mean? It was like, man, nobody's even looking at us. And I remember Tiger Khan, like, they're looking at you guys. They know who you guys are. Just keep doing what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? It was just, and then it got so far gone. It was just like, they ain't looking for me, man.
I don't think they care. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and not because I didn't think I was as good as anybody up there. I mean, you never want to sit around patting your own back, but it was literally because they have so many good guys to choose from. Why would they come to Calgary looking for a guy that's going to need a visa? You know what I mean? There were so many good guys out there looking for work anyways. It was just like, and you look, there was a long time between us breaking in and Harry and those guys getting signed. There was a long dry spell that nobody got signed.
It's so true. Yeah. That was quite the gap.
Yeah. Like they were the only guys for a decade.
Yeah.
Right? We started working a lot in 98. And is that when they got signed? Like 2006, 2007?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it's, our timing was just shitty.
Bad timing.
Bad timing. What are you going to do? All right. Now, fast forward, you get out of wrestling. Now, the one question I do get asked most is, what is Belle Lovitz up now? What are you up to now? What's going on?
Well, I will let you know that the sad story about my wrestling is that it ended and it wasn't my choice, guys. Right. I had the stupid post-concussion. I think back and it's like, oh, so all those power bombs in the dungeon were a bad idea? Yes. Now I know that. Yeah. But yeah, after like 5 serious concussions, Ross actually was the one who hooked me up with a brain doctor in Calgary. It was like the concussion specialist for the Stampeders. I was very lucky to go and see him. And he's like, so yeah, you can't wrestle anymore. And I was like, well, are you sure? And he's like, well, it's not in your best interest. And I'm like,
are you sure?
Right. And I'm like, but you're not saying no. And he's like,
so you're saying there's a chance.
Right. So what did I do? I went out that weekend. I wrestled at Lance Storm show against Danya. And I don't even remember the match. I got through it. I go to the back. I'm like so sick. I can't remember my name. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess it's over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the hardest thing to like accept that it was over, and it wasn't over on my terms. I was never going to get to have a retirement match. I was never going to get to, go have one more, match with Ravenous Randy Myers or something like that, to end on my terms. So that was like the hardest part for me, was that it was just over, and that was that.
I'm sorry to hear that, because that was what spurred me to quit.
Yeah.
I wanted to get out. Well, A, my phone was still ringing. People still wanted me to come on their shows.
Yeah.
And B, that it was still like someone wasn't telling me to quit. So I really I feel that. I feel what you're saying.
It was hard because I wasn't ready. Like, that was all I ever wanted to do. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but I was that girl who woke up and watched Maple Leaf Wrestling every Saturday morning. I went to the shows. I grew up in Calgary watching like, all I wanted to ever do was to be a wrestler. So when I found out that I wasn't going to be able to do that anymore, I took it hard.
But you weren't going to make it to the WWE and you weren't going to make a lot of money at it, but you were a wrestler, right? Like,
yes.
And I don't think wrestling is something you were. Wrestling's something you are.
Yeah.
Right. Like, even though we don't wrestle anymore, I have to stay away from shows. Right. Like, I cannot go to the shows because I physically, every now and then, like, there's flashes of brilliance. I could still do this.
Yeah. I'm like, I should get in that ring. You want to book me? I'm here. I'll do it.
Yeah. I got my gear. Like, so it doesn't, I don't think it ever leaves. Like,
I totally agree. I always feel it. It's always a part of me. I can't walk into a 7-Eleven and see the wet floor sign and not look around for somebody to bash over the head with it.
Yeah.
Like,
but those made the best sound.
Seriously, I loved that.
Yeah. And you know what? Ellie Neidhart, she has these pearls of wisdom. Like, she would hang out in the dungeon when we were training, and she just have these little nuggets. And I remember one time her saying, I don't know what exactly we were talking about. I just remember her saying that, like, you never finish with the wrestling business. The wrestling business finishes with you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's always still in there.
Yeah.
It's always still in there.
Yeah. So yeah, I finished, once I kind of accepted that, I had a couple of rough years trying to figure out like what I now wanted to be when I grew up, because I never made the second, that whole time when you're wrestling.
There's no plan B.
Have a plan B. And I'm like, F your plan B, I'm going to be a wrestler. And then all of a sudden you're not. And it's like, oh, I probably should have got a plan B when I was 20, but I get you. So I was I was still living in Calgary. I was coming and hanging out with my brother, who was living in Vancouver at the time. And I was just like taking vacations and just coming and like staying with him because I was like legit depressed. Right. And he would get up and go to school every day, and I would get up and I would play video games all day. And then he would come home and ask me about my day, and I would tell him everything that I would have changed had I made that video game. And finally, he's like, what if you like made video games like as a job? And I was like, that's the most insane thing I've heard. Who makes video games as a job? And he's like, actually. And so long story short, I ended up applying and going to Vancouver Film School. I took the game design program and I learned how to make video games.
That is awesome.
Yes. So now, everybody, if you care, I work for Eastside Games, and I am the lead narrative designer for Trailer Park Boys Greasy Money. So when you are playing that little brain phone of yours and tapping away and you read all of those horrifyingly dirty stories on Trailer Park Boys, I write those. You
write that stuff. Yeah. Okay, so slow down. Now, you said that really fast. What is this app? Where can I find it? Because I'm an idiot, as you were finding out when I was setting up before we started. You went through this really fast because this is something that's really cool.
It is cool.
As Canadians, Trailer Park Boys is somewhat I'm one of those people, like, take this for what it's worth. If you don't watch Trailer Park Boys, you could probably go fuck yourself.
Clearly. I'm with you.
Like, some people don't get it, and I understand that, but everybody knows those guys. So to me, the fact that you're writing on that show, like, don't get me wrong, I'm a big Belle Lovitz mark. But I'm a big Jamie Henwood writing on Trailer Park Bar.
Yeah, she's pretty cool because, like, I don't so it's the game. So if you guys Eastside Games is a very unique company that's based out of Vancouver, and they have a lot of really unique, cool IPs that we make games for. So, like, we have the It's Always Sunny, The Gang Goes Mobile, and we have a Cheech and Chong game, and we have our own IP, which is called Bud Farm, and it's kind of like this stoner culture company. Okay. And so I always kind of knew I wanted to work there because I was like, I think that might fit
into the lifestyle,
right? I think I should be with these people, and it was like, so. And then they start making the Trailer Park Boys game, and I was like, that's like a dream come true. And it just happened to be like perfect timing. My best friend Cam from game school, he was working on the Trailer Park Boys as a designer on the game. And he's like, hey, I think I have an in as a writer, because that's what I always wanted to do. Like I'm kind of nerdy and I know how to do some really smart tech stuff now, but I'm a big mouth. I have lots of creative ideas. I love to write. So you get an opportunity
to throw the compliment at you, to throw, I was paraphrasing what Natty said, but one of the things she specifically mentioned, we were talking about you today, were your promo skills. So honestly, she specifically mentioned like her promos were good. Her wrestling was good. So the fact that you're writing promos is not a surprise.
And it's pretty much what it is. So my whole, like, at first I was so nervous because it's like, these are like Canadian icons. Like everybody knows the Trailer Park Boys, but they're such three individually unique characters. And now it's my job to make sure that when you're reading this dialogue in the game, that you hear Ricky's voice or you hear Bubbles' voice.
It's got to be true to the character.
Yeah. And I was really nervous about that at first, because this isn't an IP that you go in and you don't kill it, so I found my gimmick. I think I do a pretty good job at it. I get to work with really awesome people. I know this is something else fun, is that through this I've actually met a really, really good friend named Trevor Risk that you guys might have heard of. He writes for that wonderful show Letterkenny.
Okay.
And he is actually my writing partner now on TPB. So I feel like all of a sudden I'm like right where I should be. And I'm with all these really cool, creative people doing stuff for like these wonderful Canadian IPs that I always dreamed of being a part. I just didn't know how the hell I would find a place there. Well, so now I just have this cool little circle of people and I get to do really, nice, fun things.
Well, I kind of have goosebumps just thinking about your journey. Do you know what I mean? From starting,
right?
Like you say, from this skinny little girl that I knew down to the dungeon. You were what, 21?
I was 20 when I first started.
You were a baby when I met you.
I know.
Now here you are, this, fast forward. It's amazing to me how a lot of us maybe didn't make millions of dollars or maybe didn't succeed by some people's level of success in wrestling. But I think it's amazing how much, that creative process used to put matches together or to come up with the promos you wanted to cut. How much of that do you use on a day-to-day basis at your job?
So much. That's the thing, is that like wrestling prepared me oddly for so many things that I didn't realize. Like even just being comfortable with like being in a room filled with men and pitching a creative idea. Like it's really scary to like pitch an idea or pitch a game or something like that, because this is your like creative heart on the line. And if someone's like, oh, that's garbage, you really feel shitty about yourself. So wrestling, like if you don't have thick skin in wrestling, like I would walk into the girls' dressing room at OVW and I was the ugly girl that everyone wanted to give a makeover to. Like I had a girl walk up to me like, Belle, we got to do something with those bags under your eyes, girl, because you look like shit today. And I'm like, okay. So, so it's just, I feel like things like that in wrestling prepared me to walk into these rooms with like straight up confidence and be like, listen up, dudes, I have a killer idea. I'm really funny. You're gonna love this. Listen up, and feel bold enough to like do that and believe what I'm saying. And
you've had to do it in a room full of hundreds of strangers.
Yes.
Right. Like it's, selling, because people don't understand when you're in wrestling, they think you're selling wrestling and you are, but essentially what you're selling is yourself.
Totally.
Right. Yeah. Like you kind of use the same skill to get over in a boardroom as you do in a room full of other people.
And really, I channel my Belle all the time. Like if a Belle is essentially Jamie times 10. Yeah. So when I need to get all hyped up and get crazy in like a pitch meeting or something like that, I find Belle in my soul and she does the promos for me. And I love that she's still an extension of me living this lifestyle, Jordy.
That is so awesome. Belle Lovitz, Jamie Henwood, I couldn't be happier that you're doing so well. Again, you're somebody that we've always kind of kept loose contact, here and there. But I have nothing but mad love and respect for you. Again, somebody I always kind of would just, sort of wanted to make sure you're doing all right.
You're so good to me. I appreciate you, Jordy. You and JP, day one, babe. I appreciate you guys so much. I'm so glad to be still talking to you 20 years later.
Right. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on here. I'm very privileged. Tell everybody where they can follow you on social media to get the latest updates on your Trailer Park Boys game.
That's a great question. I'm so old and I don't know, like I have a Twitter, like I've chatted before, but I think that this is what you should do. You should go and look for the Trailer Park Boys Greasy Money fan page on Facebook. And that's where I used to do a live stream on it where I would tell everybody what the cool things coming up were. So go and check that. Tell them Belle Lovitz sent you, and who knows, maybe you'll get a hash coin or two for free.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good one, Jamie.
Duke, you suck.
You shut your mouth!